Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a funereal Charles Coulombe.
Yeah. Yep. I'll go with that.
Yeah. Would you like to tell us what's going on, Charles?
Well, yeah. I would. My favorite aunt, Mrs. Virginia Barrett, my mother's middle sister, died this past week at the age of 97. My aunt was a very remarkable woman in her own way. I've shown an art gallery for many years. We used to call her MWWW, the most wonderful woman in Westchester, that being the county of her residence. When we lived in New York and I was little, she babysat me a lot, so I was extremely fond of her. And in so many ways, she epitomized for me a strong woman who knew how to be feminine. Very cultured, very refined, and hard as nails, if she had to be. And very the last of my mother's and father's generation of my family. She was always very encouraging of my literary and theatrical efforts growing up, even when other members of my family were not. She was an extraordinary woman, the closest thing to Auntie Mame that I've ever met in my life. And when we took my mother home to bury her back in 2015, my aunt said to me then, "Darling, don't let the next time we meet be a funeral." So I made the point of getting out there once or twice a year ever after. And I'm glad I did. The last time I saw her was January of this year. She gave up the gallery in 2016, I guess, 2017. And she stopped driving then. And she began to decline. Which, however, when I saw her last in January, she was still dressed to the nines. She, for the biggest part of our 3-hour meeting, she was wandered a bit. She'd forgotten that my mother had died. I didn't see fit to remind her. And that was very heartbreaking. But 20 minutes before I had to leave, she wanted to sing a song. So we sang Bye Bye Blackbird at her request, which coincidentally was the last song I ever sang with my mother the day before she died, back in 2015. So I guess it was popular among the sisters. We sang it, and after we sang it, she was back. The last 20 minutes, she was her old self, and it was wonderful. And I remember thinking at the time that if that would be my last memory of her, it was a good memory to go out on. And now that chapter in my life is gone. It's closed. My childhood is over. All of my close relatives that knew me as a boy are gone. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the nature of life. Every close relationship you have, your spouse, your parents, your siblings, your closest friends, you'll bury them and they'll bury you. This is what fallen nature means. This is what it means to be the children of Adam and Eve. So, I I can't pretend it doesn't hurt a great deal. It does. The funeral will be in 2 weeks in New York. Well, actually, in Greenwich, Connecticut, where she lived the last part of her life. But it is an end of an era for me. And more than that, in a certain sense, she summed up in her manner, in her style, her joie de vivre, my sort of idealized memory of the early 60s, the before time, before the hippie era, when people knew how to dress. We used to say about my aunt that she had the last living bouffant in captivity because she had the same hairstyle all the time I knew her. When I was young, it was a huge blonde helmet, and as years went by, that blonde turned gray and then white. But it was always the same hairdo. It's the funny thing about her, but when I was back in 2016 with my brother and my nephew Albert to see her, she had a beautiful apartment filled with objets d'art and everything just so, because in addition to running the art gallery for many years, she'd also done interior decoration. And you can imagine the two businesses dovetailed very nicely. But the thing about my aunt rather was that, as my father used to say, she could take two sticks and make it look stylish. And so her manner of decorating was very eclectic. So in other words, if she decorated your house, it would reflect your personality.
Yeah.
But she could throw together Louis XVI and Danish modern and make it work. And it would reflect you. Well, that was how her apartment was. It was filled with all these objets d'art and so on. So she says to me, it was my birthday, 2016, election day, actually, the day the Trumpster was elected president. And so we watched the flying home. We watched the returns all that day. But in the morning, she says to me, well, darling, it's your birthday. Take something. And I looked around at all these things. And I saw my grandfather's inkwell, which is this sort of crystal thing set in a bronze deer with antlers. And on the antlers, you would put the pens, you see. And that had been on his desk when I was a boy. And it's what I wanted. But I couldn't bear to break up the set. You see, everything in that apartment was carefully placed. And so I said, I really couldn't take anything out of it. And she said, go ahead and take something. I won't be around that much longer, and it's not going to be any use to me when I'm dead. And I said, I can't do it. She said, fine, I'll choose something. And she went right over to that inkwell, grabbed it, and handed it to me. She knew me, you see.
Yeah.
And that's gone. No one will ever know me like that again. So, love your loved ones, ladies and gentlemen. Love your parents, love your brothers and sisters, love your cousins, your uncles, your aunts, your grandparents. Hold on to them, because when they're gone, that's it. Poof. And do your very best with the younger people in your family to be close to them, to help them, to guide them. If you're an aunt or an uncle, or certainly if you're a father or mother, but don't leave out your nieces and nephews and younger cousins and so forth. Remember that they're going to need you for a very long time, because you will, if you play your cards right, you'll mean a great deal to them. And humanly speaking, there's nothing better in this world than leave behind a lot of people who love you. And certainly my aunt did. So, with that, I will ask you now of your charity to say some prayers for the repose of the soul of Virginia Barrett, uh, who was my favorite aunt and one of the finest women I've ever known in my life. So there we are. That's why I'm funereal today. But there are other things going on. For one thing, and I probably shouldn't mention this, but I will, Bernie Sanders won the California primary on Super Tuesday.
Okay, so what does that mean? Does he get to be the sacrificial lamb this election?
Well, I don't know about sacrificing him. What I do know is that how do I put it? The same brilliance in the California mentality that has put in place the Democratic Assembly, who are running the state into the ground.
Yeah.
And the mental midget, Gavin Newsom, have endorsed Bernie Sanders. If I were a Democrat, whomever California nominated, I would be against, just because our state does not show really what you could call good judgment.
Yeah, it
doesn't.
You know, it's strange. You know, I've talked to liberals, you know, businessmen in California. You know, I mean, of course, you know, from the top of the Tumbler House Tower, you're going to talk to other big-time business executives. And,
that's true.
You know, people of all, you know, different political persuasions, you know. And, you know, even the liberal businessmen, they know and hate, you know, what the Democrats in charge are doing to the state. Everybody knows that the Democrats are running California into the ground. And not even the liberals, not even Democrats can do anything about it somehow. Everybody just sort of accepts it. Like, well, what can you do?
Well, you couldn't vote. Because, like, there's no such thing as state elections. So that's out.
Well, that's actually true. You can't vote because Republicans aren't even on the ticket. That's actually true. You can't vote.
It is true. Well, that's the open primary.
It's like it's you know, the vote is basically picking like hemlock or like a bullet to the head. That's what you're voting for. Yeah. So which one? Which one are you gonna vote for? I mean, yeah.
Well, let me see. I want the nail in the forehead. That feels good. But still, the pistol in the mouth and pulling the trigger. I'd
vote for the bullet. You know, it's just quick and painless.
All right. Be that way.
Hemlock is like, but
what's really saddening to me about this, though, about the decline of California. You know, when we came out to the Golden State in the 60s, it really was a land of opportunity.
Yeah.
They were building stuff all over the place. If you think about it, think of the whole California ethos, okay?
Okay.
You start out with St. Junipero Serra and the missions, the romance of the missions, Spanish California, the Zorro and Ramona and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the gold rush. And you've got all these people come in from into primarily Northern California, and then San Francisco turns into this bustling Barbary coast. And it's really something.
Yeah.
And then, if that weren't enough, you get flooded with all these Midwesterners coming out to pursue their dreams.
Yeah.
And who does that bring us? It brings us Walt Disney. It brings us, Dr. Eaton, the founder of Forest Lawn. It brings us Ronald Reagan. And they come out with these golden dreams. Then you've got old Hollywood, you know, with the as I said, the veneer of Hollywood decadence on the old corrupt cowtown. But at the same time, you've got L.A. noir and San Francisco noir. You know, Sam Spade meets Philip Marlowe. Sam Spade being National Habits Detective.
I know both of them. And didn't
Yeah,
Humphrey Bogart play both though?
he did,
Yeah.
but not at the same time.
Yeah.
That would have been hard.
Yeah.
Although a crossover movie would have been great, wouldn't it? Like there's a case in Monterey or somewhere, and both of them have to try to solve it.
Yeah.
Philip Marlowe meets Sam Spade in the noir picture you never thought they'd make. And don't think just about that. Think about Spanish Revival, Mission Revival architecture. The bungalows, which really are vernacular architecture. California plein air, the art style, that all the murals and so forth are in. Big Sur, San Diego, Monterey, the whole Monterey Peninsula, the wilds of Northern California.
Yeah.
We can forget about the Inland Empire. And Death Valley, well, it's interesting. But anyway, California is a state that's chock-a-block with goodies, with a marvelous history, wonderful cultures of all sorts of things. This is the Golden State as the makings of paradise. So why is it so screwed up?
Oh. I don't know. Why? Tell us, Charles.
Oh, aren't you coy? Well, it goes back to the leadership, of course, and also the fact that more native Californians are leaving the state than Americans are coming in.
You know what? Because obviously I'm engaged, and you start thinking about raising a family and thinking of all the finances of this, and it occurred to me that the entire economy and price structure of California is based on both parents working. It's impossible. Like, all the prices actually make sense and are doable in the context of that. But if it's just one, then everything is like a struggle. Big time.
Well, yeah. And of course, when we came out here, or came out there, because I'm in Austria, as we're speaking, but when we came out to California, the father working was more than enough.
Yeah.
And it was a very pleasant place. One of the things I neglected to mention amongst my California motifs, of course, was the whole hippie movement, the Age of Aquarius, and all the weird religions that got their start in California. That's the other side of it. But it really is a paradise lost. And I don't know where it's going to end up. I do know that those armies of the homeless are bringing us rats and typhus, and we're sure the bubonic plague is going to wait until the coronavirus gets in among them.
It's getting here.
Of course it is.
But I'm not too, well, I don't want to get into the coronavirus too much, but...
Not yet.
I think the media's hyping it up, honestly. This is like the Ebola scare.
You're always like that. I remember when The Walking Dead came out, you told me there was no chance of a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we had Super Tuesday.
Oh. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Ha, ha, ha.
The zombie apocalypse happened, and you didn't even
clever.
notice it. See?
Okay, Charles, you got me.
Yeah. Oh, there could never be a zombie apocalypse. Yeah, then Bernie Sanders got nominated out of California. Sure. The voting dead.
Okay, okay, anything else going on, Charles? Or can we get a move on?
Oh, I guess we can get a move on. Let's blow. What do we got?
Okay, so firstly, a couple shameless promotions. We need more subscribers.
Shameless promotions?
Yeah. Yeah. I know you love those shameless promotions, Charles. So
just one question.
Yeah, here we go.
If they ordered $25 or more books, can they get free shipping and handling?
That's right, Charles. All orders on TumblrHouse.com that are $25 or more get free shipping. Can you believe that?
That's amazing. You mean only $25 and free shipping and handling?
That's right.
Wow.
So go to tumblerhouse.com, fill up your cart with books, get free shipping.
Free shipping.
You got to spend to save.
That's true. What else have we got on top of that?
Well, for patrons, exclusive content. Wow, we just had a heck of a patron pre-show. Charles just broke me. He just broke me with his jokes on this last pre-show. It happened.
It's true.
And for $1 a month, you get access to this. It was, I think, like a 30-minute pre-show on this one, and we had a lot of really fun questions from the patrons. So if you're a huge fan of the show and you're just not getting enough content from the full episode, as low as $1 a month, you get access to the pre-show. We ask all your questions, all that good stuff. So
absolutely,
yeah. But if you know what, if if $1 is just too much, if that's too much money, and you're a fan of the show, just make sure you're subscribed. We're at like 7,300 subscribers. We're desperately trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. Once we get to 10,000, I have a super mega surprise for everyone. We'll be able to unleash a really cool new thing at 10,000 subscribers.
Wow.
Yeah, YouTube will allow us to do this whole new fascinating... I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, that's a big benchmark right there. So yeah, 30% of our viewers are not subscribed yet. Just hit that button at the bottom right corner of your screen, over the Tumblr House icon. Get subscribed. Start following our channel, and also click like. Click like. That helps us a lot. So incorporate that into your weekly routine for our videos. Click that like button. Okay, that'll do it for the shameless plugs. I hope that wasn't too painful.
I thought it was great.
I thought so too.
Now, there's no money down?
No money... What? What did you say, Charles?
No money down?
No money down. No. Absolutely free. Doesn't cost you a thing.
No deposit required?
No deposit required.
Act now?
30-day, 100% money back guaranteed. Lifetime tech support. 1-year warranty.
I think a lifetime of watching late night TV.
Gluten-free, 100% organic, all natural.
Years of watching late night ads are finally paying off.
0% APR.
Call right now. Operators are standing by. Act now and you get this amazing. Be the first on your block. Oh, gosh.
All right.
Let's
move this into the memes of production.
Nationalize the memes of production.
Yes. Every time we run the memes of production, a new country's memes gets nationalized. So
that's right.
Let's keep it rolling. All right. So
the revolution will not be televised.
That's right. All right. We just have one today from a comment from Louis de Benald. He says, "It is always a pleasure to watch whatever Tumblr House uploads. Your knowledge and wisdom always amazes me. Can you please tell us how you grew so knowledgeable and so wise?"
Of course. It was
wait, hold up, Charles. It says Mr. Franchini, not Charles Coulombe. Yeah, Mr. Franchini? Sorry, you didn't let me finish. It said Mr. Franchini. He's talking to me. Yeah, sorry, Charles. So, wow.
Well,
wow, so how to begin?
Well, you knew me when you were first 8.
Oh,
when you were 8 years old.
Oh, that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do.
Well.
No, you know what? I'm gonna show off my humility. I'm gonna be world famous. I want to be world famous for my humility, Charles. So.
Oh, very good. Very good indeed.
No.
Take credit for that humility.
No, no, seriously, Charles is so brilliant. What really, um, it helps so much to watch Charles and to read Charles because then you get to pawn off his insights as your own, right? Then you get to be smart. Don't cite your source. Don't cite Charles, and it's like, look how smart I am. See, I just listen to Charles and read Charles. Look at that. And parties, it's like, wow. I bet you don't have all these edgy opinions and insights on the Civil War, do you? You don't know anything about General Howe. Yeah.
In the Civil War.
Yeah, in the Civil War. Yeah, ha ha ha. Yeah, no, no, he wasn't even alive during the Civil War. But
General Howe at Vicksburg, the untold story. Now it can be told. Oh gosh.
Yeah, but no. Also, don't forget Bill Biersack. I mean, there's still because a lot of people forget the audio tapes that we transcribed. The first videos on the YouTube channel. We have a playlist for them. The Biersack and Coulombe talks. Those are huge sources of information on things like Americanism, evolution, the Assumption. There's all these different amazing topics. Doomsday. Oh, that's a great one. And you'll find yourself just latching on to these opinions because I remember I listened to the Doomsday episode of Charles, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna just adopt that opinion because that's dead on. Seriously.
Well, I got to tell you, Bill, of course, is a really brilliant guy. And the thing is that we all of us stand on the shoulders of giants,
Yeah.
But of course, I'm reminded of being at a party once years ago, and your brother Steve was there.
Yeah.
And I made some idiotic observation of the kind I like to make, like, I don't know, confusion is the guardian of truth, or something along those lines. And someone who was standing there and was brighter than most said, "What does that even mean?" And your brother said, "Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't have to. It's deep." And the fellow was impressed. So,
yeah.
Steve showed him, didn't he?
Yep. Gosh, you guys have so many fun stories. You guys have so many fun stories.
Well, we had some really, really good times, I got to tell you. The truth of the matter, though, is that in a world gone mad, the only way you can stay sane is to be crazier.
Stay sane inside insanity.
In the immortal words of Columbia, the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah.
That's right. There's a film I can't recommend as a film to see the entirety, but it does have bits and pieces that are really worthwhile.
Yeah.
Of course, my all-time favorite is the exchange between Dr. Frankenfurter and his rebellious underling, when the doc says, "I ask for nothing," and the rebellious minion says, "And you shall have it in abundance." It's hard to argue with that.
Whatever happened to all your Ed Wood references? We haven't heard from Ed Wood in a long time.
Well, it's funny you mention this because being in Bratislava yesterday brought back what would you call flashbacks. The first time I was in Bratislava 10 years ago, I was doing a book signing in an English language bookstore there. And afterwards, a bunch of Slovak youths took me out drinking and eating first, then drinking. Well, it had gotten to be about 1 a.m., and I was ready to go back to my hotel. So I said, "Well, kids, it's been a lot of fun, but I really got to go now." And one of them says, "Well, just one question, Mr. Coulombe." And I said, "Yeah, what's that?" You were living in Hollywood in the 60s. I said, yeah. Did you ever hear of a man named Criswell? They were Ed Wood fans, and they were Criswell fans. And the idea of finding a nest of Criswell fans in Bratislava, it was, so I sat down. It was another hour and a half or two before I left.
It's providential. That's what
It
that
was,
is.
it was providential, and it proved one of Ed Wood's major dicta.
What?
Life is a strange place in which to live. He proved it. And you know another one of my favorite quotes of his?
What?
Well, it's a scene where in Plan 9 from Outer Space, when the airline pilot is about to go fly his plane, but he's worried about leaving his wife, who lives next to the cemetery, by herself because of these zombie risings and so forth. So he says, I still wish you'd go and stay with your mother. And she says, most men get upset when their wives go home to mama. And he said, that's not the point. And she replies, and it sums up the movie and much of life itself. That's all the point there's going to be.
Wow, I don't think I've heard that one from you before.
Well, now you have. That's all the point there's going to be. That's a lot like life in general.
That is.
Yeah. See, you stick with Criswell, with Ed Wood, with Rocky Horror, and you will be equipped with the philosophical background necessary to navigate your way through the seas of modern insanity. And you'll always have an answer. When someone comes up to you with garbage like, "You Catholics, you want to trap women and make them subjected to men," you can smile and say, "We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives."
Wow.
It's true.
You should create a list of like catch-all responses using those three people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you written an article on that anywhere? You should do that.
I haven't. It's good. Staying sane inside insanity would be the title of it.
Yeah, we need that sort of advice. When you handle craziness, just throw craziness back at these people.
Yeah,
it's like it's fun, right?
Yeah, and of course, my favorite phrase doesn't come from any of the three, but it is lovely, and it is confusion is the guardian of truth.
I love that one.
It's beautiful when someone says something to you like, Catholicism is all about pedophilia.
Okay.
Well, confusion is the guardian of truth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you mean by that? We are all lighted candles in a darkened room, weary travelers on the road of life.
Yeah, that's deep, Charles.
Deep like a tabletop.
All right, on to the questions.
Questiones.
Wow, actually, this is a perfect question. I heard a Protestant protesting on my campus saying the Catholic Church invented Islam as a way to distort real Christianity. What were some of the craziest claims you have ever heard about the Catholic Church? Which are your favorite? That actually is perfect. So it's like, the Catholic Church invented Islam to create confusion to guard the truth.
That makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Well, it actually tops anything I've got, but I would say my favorite of the ones I know, well, actually there are two. One is that Ludendorff, is General Ludendorff of Germany, rather, who helped Hitler come to power. He was of the opinion, he was a conspiracy theorist, but he believed that the Jesuits and the Freemasons were in it together. So Masonry, in the Great Conspiracy.
Oh.
So Freemasonry and Catholicism are actually allied.
I mean, that's kind of, gosh, okay. You can actually unpack that a little bit
Well, you can.
because,
The fact that they've been constant enemies for the past 250 years. Uh, I mean, it's a little bit like saying, "Oh, I don't know, the Democrats and the Republicans are in on it together." Oh, wait a minute. No, maybe that's not a good comparison.
but I mean, you have liberal Catholics espousing Freemasonic values.
Well, you do, but his idea was that the totality of the Catholic Church and everything it teaches is in league with Masonry and everything it teaches.
What was his background?
Ludendorff, he was a Lutheran Protestant who became a neo-pagan.
That's pretty exotic. Okay.
Yeah, he was an exotic guy.
Okay, well, that's an interesting one. What's number 2?
Our Lord was actually a space alien.
Who said that?
Well, a kind of crazy person I met. Our Lord was a space alien, and the Catholic Church is actually a means whereby the aliens dominate Earth.
Wait, so who said that?
No one you've met, a crazy person.
Wow. You won't even drop a name on that one.
I won't
Okay.
drop a name. It's someone you know, and it's not on. I could say Bob Johnson. It would mean as much. But it was the concept that caught my attention. The idea that the Catholic Church's entire history represents 2,000 years of alien domination of Western civilization.
That's pretty cool. I kind of want to roll with that.
You like that?
We're aliens and we are just going to we're going to
Well, we're
steamroll
not
you.
aliens. We're not aliens,
Oh, we're
but the
not?
church. No, no. Our Lord is an alien, and He set up the church as a means of dominating Earth.
So person's eyes, what happened to Jesus then as an alien?
Well, he was evacuated. His phony body died, and the alien was evacuated, and then reanimated.
Wow.
And the ascension was his return to the mothership.
That is really, I don't even, I feel stupider now having known that.
When you feel stupider after receiving something that thinks it's enlightening you, that's a triumph of some kind. I don't know for whom, but I do have another guy who believed that actually all of what we consider European history had really taken place in North America. Columbus had actually discovered Europe and so forth.
How does that work?
No, the United States, the North America, was actually the center of world history. Rome and Greece and all that were here.
So, okay, wait, I don't understand.
You are beginning to feel stupider by the moment.
So Mesopotamia. So what happened with Mesopotamia then?
It was the Louisiana Delta.
What? What did
It's
you
the
say?
Louisiana Delta, you asked.
The real Mesopotamia is Louisiana Delta, the Louisiana Delta, and that was the beginning of life.
Well, there, and also the Egyptian civilization, which was up around Missouri and Illinois and Kentucky, when they came together.
How did the Great Pyramids happen?
Well, they were built by the Egyptians there outside St. Louis.
How did? So it's like a House of Loretto miracle where it was transported from.
No, they weren't transported. They're fake.
What?
The ones in Egypt are all fake.
Well, what happened to the real ones?
The real ones they've been built over and damaged. It is referred to the Cahokia Mounds and things like that. The people we call the mound builders were the real Egyptians.
Are you expanding on what you heard from this person, or are you actually representing his opinion?
I'm representing his opinion. It was too precious to add to.
Wow. Okay.
There's a Yiddish word that describes this.
What?
Meshuggah. You know what meshuggah means?
I don't know what it means.
It's Yiddish. It's for in French. You would say folle.
Okay. And the meaning is?
Nuts.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Sandra.
Okay, Sandra.
What does Charles think about corporatism? At some time, did some Catholic administrations prefer this form of economics?
Well, what is corporatism? Basically, as you know, in Marxist theory, labor and capital have to be the enemies of each other. They have to be opposed. Corporatism says that every element of every given employ, every given business should be allied. So, in other words, let's take shoes. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what are your basic elements in shoes? You've got the leather makers, the leather people who provide the shoe leather.
Okay.
You've got the independent cobblers who basically do the designs. They're the ones who come up with the bespoke shoes. You've got the shoe factory owners who are inspired by those styles that cobblers make. You've got the workers of the shoe factories. And then you've got the retailers, the people, the shoe stores. Okay?
Got it.
So the idea behind both communism and what we call capitalism is that these five groups should be constantly at war with each other. At the very least, trying to chisel each other out of money. And at the very worst, try to do each other in. Now, corporatist idea is that instead those five should be working together because each provides a service without which nobody's going to get anything. So what's that?
How do you do that given that each entity is a separate interest?
Well, that's the thing. The idea is that you form what are called in some places corporations, in other places guilds, that would bring the five of them together and coordinate them. Now, you may have caught immediately the first problem with that. And the first problem is if you look at these things in a strictly economic way, nobody's going to do that.
Yeah.
So a corporate system can only work if it is subordinated not to mere economics, but to a higher interest. So, what is that higher interest? Well, in the case of the Italians, it was the state, because fascism was based on corporatism. And inevitably, when you bring up fascism and Mussolini, people immediately think of the man who ruined Italy by allying with Adolf Hitler. What they don't remember is the man who steered Italy through the Depression. There's a reason why Italy did not feel the worst of the Depression, and that was because, to some degree, fascist economics worked. At least for a while, anyway. And they were based on this corporatist idea. Your major thing, your overreaching thing could be, God help us, race. And that was why the Nazis claimed to be corporatists. But, as Sandra rightly guessed, there were Catholic corporatists, of whom the most famous was Pius XI in Quadragesimo Anno. And there were a number of Catholic writers who endorsed the idea, and sort of allied notions like guild socialism and distributism and so forth. Where was corporatism attempted by Catholics? Well, apart from some private measures, Spain under Franco, Salazar's Portugal, Smetona's Lithuania, Austria's Dollfuss, actually for a while in World War II, Tiso's Slovakia, and then a couple of places in Latin America. Now notice, none of these places actually had the time to, the regimes didn't last long enough to really bring it to fruition. except for Spain and Portugal. And even there, they had to adjust because of, shall we say, foreign competition. But Catholic corporatism was an attempt to put the social teachings of the church into actual practice within the context of a modern industrial / consumerist economy. So there you are.
I still don't get. I mean, I still don't get it. It still didn't answer the question. Like, in a single negotiation, let's say between the supplier and the retailer, I want your product, but I want a 40% discount. They want to sell it at a lesser discount, 20%. How does an overarching Catholic theme solve that negotiation?
Because you've got you've got in each corporation, you would have an impartial, what do you call it, board to adjudicate these things. And bear in mind, the whole basis of them, what they look back toward for inspiration, were the medieval guilds. So you would, for it to work, the leadership certainly, and the bulk of the membership would have to be believing Catholics.
Okay, so it's not a quote unquote free market economy per se.
Well, yes and no. It's free market in the sense that everyone has to come up with the best quality that they can. But it's not free market in the sense that labor is free to grab whatever it can, or capital is free to grab whatever it can.
The prices are sort of set for negotiations
Yeah.
like that. So, playing devil's advocate, if I was, let's say, I own the supplier side, I would just stack the board, and so that the retailers like get a minimal discount, and that I don't have to sell it to them for cheap.
Well, the thing is, what the business of the corporation would be to determine what you actually need, what they actually need, what the retailers actually need.
What's the goal of the corporation?
The goal of the corporation is to do two things: is to provide a living amount of money for each participant in the trade. In other words, you, as the owner of the factory, you need a certain amount of money to make a decent, livable profit and to keep the factory going. There's a certain basic amount you absolutely have to have, below which either you're not making any money, and or you can't keep the factory going. The laborers, there's a certain basic amount below which they can't live. The retailers, there's a certain basic amount below which it's not profitable for them to sell anything. And so too with the independent cobblers and with the leather providers. So the job of the corporation is to determine a fair amount that will allow each of you to get what you need, as opposed to every possible penny you can get.
Okay, that sounds great in a society that is not subject to fallen human nature. How do you make sure that corporation is not impacted by corruption?
Well, that's always a problem, and there had all sorts of elaborate schemes to avoid that if they could, which worked better or worse depending on the place and the time. And again, you'd have to make kind of a study of it, because there were very, very different answers to that particular question. But the whole point of it was to avoid the sorts of wildcat strikes and lockouts that crippled the European economy during the Depression.
I see.
And again, as I say, in Italy, they managed to make quite the go of it. which is why they did not feel the worst effects of the Depression. You didn't have the long bread lines that we had in the United States.
I see. That's okay. So to me, there's a lot of lingering questions,
Well, there
but
should
the
be.
answers are all going to be, I'm sure, super in depth and require extended reading. Do you have any reading recommendations for this?
I do. Father Cahill wrote a book called The Shape of the Christian State. And he
No,
actually goes into
no,
great
no. I
interest.
actually know that book. That's the
You do know that.
framework of a Christian state, not
The
shape of.
the framework of a Christian
Yeah,
state.
but
It's
he's
worth reading.
anti-Semitic, big time, big
No, he
time.
hates what? He hates Arabs? Anyway, he talks very much about this kind of machinery. I can recommend what's his name? René de la Tour du Pin, who's a French writer on the issue. I can recommend von Vogelsang, who's Austrian. And I can recommend an article I did years ago called the Search for a Catholic State or the Quest for a Catholic State, one or the other. And of course, you also want to read Pius XI's Quadragesimo Anno.
I did delve into framework of a Christian state, and that was unbelievable. Some of the things it said, but oh gosh, some of the stuff he said about the Jewish influence, his citations were a little dubious to me.
Well,
But
that may be,
yeah,
but I repeat, citations beyond. The question is the main frame of the argument. Also, don't forget, when writers of that sort were talking about the Jews, what they were talking about was international finance, which
yeah.
in those days was in the hands of major Jewish banks.
Well, no, well the area in this particular book, he's again, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. It was just a lot to digest, but he seemed to suggest that a huge part of the communist revolution in Russia was all the leadership were Jews.
A lot of them were.
Yeah, so I mean, like it was like 60% or something like that. Like,
At the very top, I mean, you've got to remember the people like Trotsky and folks like that. They were definitely Jews. They were what I would call good Jews. But, it's kind of like in Austria-Hungary, where the Jews were very divided. In fact, they were divided kind of into three. If they were socialist, they absolutely hated the Habsburgs. If they were assimilated and non-socialist, or if they were unassimilated, that is to say, very Orthodox, very Hasidim, then they were very pro-Habsburg.
yeah.
So you get into the situation where if you were to ask me, were the Jews pro or anti-Habsburg, I'd have to say they were both.
Of course. That makes sense.
And this is why Hitler hated the Habsburgs. But you see, if you looked at it from you might say, the wrong end of the glass, you could decide that both Karl Renner and the Habsburgs were Jewish puppets.
I see. That's a good point.
You look at it from the wrong end of the telescope, you say. Or to put this another way, you have Freemasons. Take the American Revolution. You have Freemasons who are very, very powerful in Great Britain. You have Freemasons who are very, very powerful in the United States, in the colonies.
Yeah.
Now, there are several ways you could look at this. You could decide that both the British and the American rebels were serving the Masonic order.
Yeah.
Or you could say that the Masonic order is such a big part of the Anglosphere, and was then, that any educated individual in a position of authority was likely to belong to a lodge.
I see.
I'll put this a third way. and I'll take this from life. You know what the Rotary Club is, yeah?
Not really.
It's a service organization like Kiwanis, the Lions, etc. It's basically it brings together businessmen of any given town that they happen to be in to do charitable stuff.
Okay.
You know, march of dimes, that kind of thing. All right. Well, we have in downtown Los Angeles Rotary number 5. And it tells you, because there are thousands of Rotary clubs around the world, that Rotary number 5 is one of the oldest.
Yeah.
And I went to a meeting of Rotary number 5. They have these lunch meetings. And I soon realized that there were a lot of the movers and shakers in Los Angeles there. There were politicians, there were people in the film industry, there were people in real industries. Sorry. There were people in, all sorts of things, but movers and shakers on the local scene in LA. Now, here's where the conspiracy theory would be fun. You could make the claim that Rotary number 5 runs Los Angeles because the movers and shakers were there.
It's true. I mean, they're all there.
They're all there. But here's the thing. Does Rotary number 5 rule Los Angeles? Or do the movers and shakers of LA join Rotary number 5 because it's the Rotary Club that's downtown and that's what people in their position do?
I think the Rotary Club rules Los Angeles, to be honest.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, now, here's the thing. I was invited to join Rotary number 5.
Wow. That's an honor and a privilege, Charles.
Yeah, well, that's great. But if I had, would that suddenly make me one of the rulers of Los Angeles?
Well, you've got to go to, like, the meeting after the meeting, right? Where all the bigwigs are, playing cards and, smoking cigars. And then that's where it really gets done, you see?
Yeah,
You're at
sure.
the low level. I mean, you can't be at the top level immediately. That's just presumptuous, right?
I would never be at the top level. For one thing, if I were, I'd run into you there.
That's true.
Yeah. Guiding the destinies of the city from your penthouse high atop the Tubman House Tower.
Yeah.
But no, seriously. But you see the point I'm making.
Yeah, the different perspective of a single organization or grouping of people.
Group.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you say, take an example in Sydney, Australia. Something like 25%, maybe not that high, 18, 19% of the lawyers in Sydney are Jewish. But Jews are tops only 2% of the people of Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
Now, there are two ways to look at this. Can you guess what the two ways are?
Yeah, what you said before.
Exactly. And this... People want easy, simple solutions. There aren't any. And of course, if you want to be stupid and say, well, the very fact that you mentioned that 18% of the lawyers are Jews means you're anti-Semitic. Well, the problem is what you've just done is you made the people who say that the law in Sydney is a Jewish plot, you made them look sane. You just proved their point. Similarly, it's like on if you want to make fascists, do what our university people do and say that anyone who's proud of his country is a fascist. Go ahead, say that. You've just proved the real fascists right. Thank you. Because you're stupid, you're bringing about the very thing you pretend you don't want. You're creating fascists. You're creating anti-Semites. You're manufacturing them because you're a liar and you're a moron and you're in charge. Those three things, in charge, moronic, and lying, are what breed extremism. If you're if you're not willing to look at these things, let's say, yeah, they're Jews are in positions of importance out of all proportion to their numbers. That's true. Is that an evil, terrible thing? Not necessarily. But if you pretend it isn't true, and it is true, then you'll make the wild folk seem sane. Because their assertion is that you're lying to cover it up. And of course you are lying to cover it up. Now, not for the reasons they say. You're not actually employed by the International Jewish Masonic Black Conspiracy. But you nevertheless are to some degree proving their point. It's like when Angela Merkel put the gag order, or she didn't, I guess it was the state government in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. They had these mass gang rape incidents of Muslim gangs going after German girls on New Year's Eve a few years ago. And the police who dealt with the issue were put under a gag order by the state government. And a few of them blew the whistle. And of course, you could guess that the quote-unquote extremists said, you see, the government want to bring in mass Muslim and drown us, and blah blah blah. Well, see, doing something stupid like that gag order plays right into their hands.
I see.
And what kind of moron wants to cover up gang rapes anyway? What kind of evil person would do that? Well, these grooming gangs in England, who go after underage white chicks to groom them as girl prostitutes. And they try to cover this up and all that. And what happens? It becomes public knowledge, and public confidence in the government and law enforcement is severely shaken. You can't do that. You've got to call a spade a spade. Because I guarantee you, if sane people do not tell the truth, power will go to insane people who tell the truth. Part of the truth.
Yeah, part of the truth.
I don't mean its entirety.
Yeah.
Their facts may be true. It's the interpretation that's problematic.
Right.
But see, because they're willing to discuss the facts and you're not, guess what?
It's interesting. Okay.
Well,
a lot of truth bombs in there, Charles. This was a great segment.
Not my fault. I blame my parents.
All right. Next question.
They never let me play with tacks when I was a boy.
Okay, this is Charles bringing something and then happened in the pre-show. For all you patrons or non-patrons, you might not know what he's doing here, but Charles is using the metaphor of a moronic child for society in general. That we want to play in the street with the cars and we want to eat tacks. And then,
yes.
And then we get pissed off when Daddy doesn't let us.
And he doesn't let us grab the flame on the burner either.
Yeah.
Or drink iodine.
Yeah, because he hates us and he doesn't want us to have a good time.
Exactly.
Okay. So, you've created this image of the most annoying child in the world. Just as stupid, as whiny, as bratty, as...
He was pretty annoying, wasn't he?
He was. For those of you who want to see it, you have to go to the pre-show. It's really... Charles broke me with this one.
It's true. And it was an obnoxious child, I must say. I mean, he's the poster child for child abuse.
He was. Okay. Right.
Well, you notice he never complained about his dad hitting him.
That's true.
So he wouldn't let him do what he wanted.
Okay. Next question is from Brian.
Okay, Brian.
Why has only St. Patrick's Day seemed to hang on as a remnant of cultural Catholicism? Why not Our Lady of Mount Carmel for Italians and so on?
Well, because the most important segment of the American Catholic Church is the Irish. I mean, they're the majority of the hierarchy and all that. You see those things in other countries and in areas, too, that have large amounts of particular varieties of Catholics. So you will see St. Joseph's Day as a big deal in New Orleans, Louisiana. Of course, there are a lot of Irish there. So St. Joseph's and St. Patrick's, who are a day apart, turn into this weird double festival where both the Italians and the Irish celebrate each other. It's very strange. The French Canadians go wild for Saint Jean Baptiste in Quebec, and they do in parts of New England. In northern New Mexico, every village has its own fiesta. But on a national level, the Irish were the most influential and the most dominant group amongst the Catholics. And also, there's the fact that Irish culture, in terms of its music, its dancing, its consumption of mass amounts of alcohol, has an inherently compelling nature to it.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay.
People like getting plastered.
Yeah. But I mean, Irish don't have a monopoly on getting plastered.
No, they don't, but they do have a monopoly on being sanctimonious about it.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, who else would dream of tinting beer their national color?
Yeah.
And green is a pretty color. I have to admit, I like green.
Yeah. Yeah. Green's my favorite color.
And you're about as Irish as patio furniture.
Patio furniture?
Yeah, you've heard of the Wild Irishman patio furniture?
No. Tell me about them.
There's no furniture. You know how all the Irish names start with O?
Yeah.
His name is Patty O'Furniture.
I don't get it. Why furniture? I don't get it.
Patio furniture.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow, that was bad. It took me a while.
You're kind of slow today.
Patio furniture. Gosh.
Patio furniture. You never heard of him, have you?
Never heard of. Wow.
I bet you never heard of Monsignor Oblivion.
Wow. I never actually pictured. Wow. I just heard the word oblivion, not oblivion or
Monsignor Oblivion. You know, that's where he led his parish to.
Wow. Okay.
Well, you know, he was a good priest. He introduced bingo. You know, he loved the little ones. You know, he was a very strange man. Was Monsignor Oblivion. And by the time the lawsuits were all settled, well, there was barely anything left.
Oh, what can you do?
All that was left was the rectory patio furniture.
All right. Okay, next question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Do you know what the hierarchy of angels and the one for demons are and their roles in our everyday lives?
Yes.
Okay, next question is from Adrian. Greetings, Vincent and Charles. Hope all is well with you. I'm woefully ignorant on the subject of the French Revolution. So a while back, I decided to remedy this by reading the Oxford History of the French Revolution. I was utterly surprised when Robespierre was pictured as a man of restraint while the terror was perpetrated, rather than its chief protagonist, as I was taught in high school. The historian claimed the role he played was distorted by surviving Jacobins who were eager to place the blame of the terror on someone else, mainly Robespierre. Is this an accurate portrayal of Robespierre, or is this an example of revisionism? Lastly, what books would you recommend to gain a better understanding of this confusing period in history?
Well, let me see. How do I answer that question? I would say that the first thing you should bear in mind is that there is a good deal of revisionism regarding the French Revolution, and also that also the people in general, writers in general on in English on American history and so forth, French history, tend to take the more liberal approach, I think is the best way I can put it. So I would recommend, as far as books go, Bernard Fay, who wrote a book called Louis XVI or the End of a World. And I would recommend one by a fellow called Warren Carroll called The Guillotine and the Cross.
Hmm.
Now, there was also, if I remember correctly, I can't remember the title, so forget it. But those two would be good for you to begin with anyway.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Giovanni. There are many ideas about the origin of the world, such as the 4004 BC idea and other ideas. Which origin do you believe? The one in Genesis or another idea?
The 4004 thing came from Archbishop Usher, who was the Protestant Archbishop of Armagh. So it doesn't really have a lot to do with us. I certainly believe in the account in Genesis, most particularly with regard to Adam and Eve. We know that we all descend from two people genetically, mitochondrial Adam, mitochondrial Eve, as they call them. And I see no reason that they shouldn't be regarded as Adam and Eve. And presumably, the story of the fall occurred to them. Everything else regarding the account in Genesis, there's no reason why it oughtn't to be true. I mean, the whole notion of evolution, as we were taught it, is filled with holes. Starting with genetics and passing on to things like our not really knowing what fossilization is, the process, how it comes about, how long it takes.
Yeah.
None of the alternatives that have been given, especially today, really hold water. So, in default of anything else, I'll go with Genesis.
All right.
What's that?
Sorry, I'm grabbing a book for a shameless plug.
Oh, shameless plug.
Yeah.
Is this going to be a shameless plug?
Yeah, that's right, Charles.
Oh.
Just a book I'm reading, Theistic Evolution, The Teilhardian Heresy by Wolfgang Smith. I just started reading this. This is by published by Angelica Press, I believe, which is a traditional Catholic publisher. And this alongside Father Ripperger's Metaphysics of Evolution, which is an attack on evolution from a philosophical standpoint. So you've got the scientific, attack, and then you've got the philosophical attack. It's good resources on the topic.
I have to say something about Wolfgang Smith.
Yeah, sure.
I had the pleasure of meeting him about a month and a half ago, in Los Angeles. We had lunch with Rick Delano at Musso's.
Yeah.
And he's 90 years old, Austrian, brilliant man. He has a distinguished career in applied science. He invented a reentry system for NASA and that kind of thing. But he also has done a great deal in theoretical science, especially in terms of physics and so forth.
Mm.
And he's the subject of a recent documentary by Rick called The End of the Quantum Principle. I think it's called, something like that.
Mm.
I didn't get the chance to see it because I had to give a lecture of my own that night, so I didn't go. But I hope to sooner rather than later. Smith himself is an extraordinarily brilliant man.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So, I think if you buy this with Metaphysics of Evolution, guess what, Charles?
Is it $25?
It is $25, so you get free shipping if you buy these together. And I think I paired these up on the frequently bought together. So one click of a button, and you get free shipping.
Free shipping and handling?
That's right, Charles.
Wow. Operators are standing by. This offer good in most states and territories.
That's right. All right, so there's actually a lot of things I want to talk about. I want to touch on for this. So Giovanni mentioned the origin of the world, such as the 4004 BC idea. I don't know this idea. Can you tell us what that's
Well,
about?
as I say, it was proposed by the Protestant Archbishop Usher of Armagh in Ireland. It was his reading of the Bible and his dating. Uh, as you know, there's there are two dates given to the age of the world in two different versions of the Bible. One in the Septuagint, one in the Hebrew text. The Jewish years come from the Hebrew text. The Septuagint is what we use in the proclamation of Christmas.
Hmm.
You know, where it says in the 6,000 something or other history of the day of the beginning of the world and so forth. Um, I mean, the problem you face in dealing with all this stuff is that the very period of creation, how was time measured? What was it? I don't know. Maybe it's all of 6,000 plus years, precisely the sort of years we know.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. I
The
wasn't there.
so this is such an important point for me because this is like the essence of our faith. If you get Genesis wrong, because then you can't answer why there's original sin or death in the world,
Well, that's it.
right?
The fall is the fall is the essential reality with which we live. Because of the fall, well, I said earlier in the broadcast that, as with the death of my aunt, every worthwhile, deep relationship you will ever have is going to end by you dying or they're dying. That's part of the fall of man. That's part and parcel of what the fall meant. And it's such a terrible thing. It's such a horrible thing that even though Jesus knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, he wept. Because death is horrible. And it came to us, it came into the world, and it came into our species through the fall. Uh, Everything about us, even the possibility that we're actually decaying. You've heard this idea that DNA is decaying,
Hmm.
which is why people aren't as smart as they were
Okay.
or as strong. And I don't know how true that is, but it's a theory that's been based. And if it is true, it's obviously yet another example of what the fall did to us. It made our wills weak. It made our resolves paltry. And looking at it the other way, turning it around, Alois Wiesiger, in his occult phenomena in the light of theology, hazards a theory, which is that some of the things that people have, like precognition
Mm-hmm.
or certain talents, like the ability to play the piano without ever having read music, that these might be remnants of the human abilities before the fall. In other words, the idea being that before the fall, we had precognition and we could communicate telepathically. And we, of course, being in this case Adam and Eve, but still, and we could play instruments just by hearing music. Had the potential to.
Mm.
But with the fall, all of that was damaged, wrecked.
It's interesting. So, I'm going to provide a brief defense because this the literal interpretation of Genesis, because it's so important, and people always say, "Oh, the church teaches that Genesis is figurative and not literal." That's not true. In the old calendar, Christmas Eve historically was the feast of Saints Adam and Eve in the
Right.
old calendar, which obviously needed to be airbrushed out of modern thought. Taylor Marshall himself defends this. You can look him up because he talks about this of that feast day. I know Brother Andre does as well. This was a feast on the old calendar. This was part of, what all the church fathers talked about. Very recently, because this is such an important issue, I looked up what Scott Hahn, the great Scott Hahn, thought of this. He's a literal interpretation of Genesis big time. I mean, not only is he literal interpretation, but I'm reading him. He's like trying to map out how long Adam was a bachelor. Before Eve was created. He's trying to map out the intricacies of the reality. And so, and another thing that the argument that I've developed for myself in terms of the literal interpretation is you look at Genesis 5, which no one ever talks about. Because it's a very boring chapter, because some people are saying, Genesis is like poetry. It's figurative language, all this and that. This is not figurative language. I'm going to read a passage. Okay, when Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. After he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. And this goes on and on and on. There's like 8 paragraphs of this to Enosh, to Kenan to Mahalalel, and then to Jared, and then to Methuselah, and then it's on and on and on to Lamech. And so what is this? Is this poetry? Because this does not sound like poetry to me. This sounds like an historical account.
There's another point. There's another point too, which you reminded me of. If that theory about the decay of DNA is correct, that would certainly account for the ongoing shortening of the human lifespan.
I myself have wondered about how that happened. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly it's hard to say. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if you get rid of the fall, not only do you get rid of the Catholic faith, you get rid of anything meaning anything at all. Yes. Because without the fall, this is as good as it's going to get, kiddies. Enjoy it.
Right, and that's why it's as I remember from one of your talks with Professor Biersack. He makes the point that atheists know that if you attack the first for the first book of the Bible, and you discredit that, you can discredit the entire thing.
Everything falls. Everything falls. Of course, I've always said that I can prove that Adam is my direct ancestor.
How's that?
Well, it's when our Lord says to him, what have you done? And his response is, it's the woman you gave me. 2 cop-outs in one sentence. Tell me I couldn't do that. And it's so smooth. It's the woman you gave me. So it's Eve's fault and it's God's fault, not Adam. I resonated to that. I knew exactly how I felt.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been spending the rest of our lives, the rest of our time trying to escape responsibility in just the same way.
Okay. The next question is from Matthew.
Okay.
All right. The Irish Catholic Bishops' Conference sent a message this past week to all dioceses in response to the recent coronavirus outbreak. They have declared that to prevent the possible spread of the virus during Mass, a number of measures are to be enacted. These measures are no sign of peace. Extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist are not to receive from the chalice, and the people are to receive the Eucharist on the hand, not on the tongue. I normally receive on the tongue, but since the announcement, I have not gone up to receive Holy Communion. However, with Easter coming up and having to receive during Easter as part of the Easter duty, I was wondering what you both thought of the situation. Do you have any advice on what the proper and prudent course of action should be in regards to receiving on the hand or tongue?
Well, this is a very hard question. It's one I haven't had to confront yet. I really don't know what I'm going to do if I am forced to confront it. I've never taken communion in the hand, and I have to admit, this smells to me as though some of the bishops were taking advantage to try to force everyone to do so, because they've always wanted to. So I don't know. What I can say is this. There is one major form of transmission of disease that has not been touched on with the bishop's decrees, and I think that we all need to put it into practice, regardless of whether or not they move in on this very important area. I refer, of course, to the matter of the collection. Now, if there is a danger of infection from receiving on the tongue, there's a much greater one from putting money into the collection plate. Because you could easily pick up the virus from a collection plate, just touching the thing, because you don't know who's touched it. Someone with the virus who puts money in the collection, the priest could easily be infected by handling the money. And if the priest is infected, it doesn't matter if you receive on the tongue or the hand, because the priest is going to give it to you either way. So, my recommendation, especially if you're in a diocese where the priest is forbidden to give communion on the tongue, is to explain to him, keeping your distance, of course, that you won't be able to contribute any money to the collection or even touch the basket. If it's possible for you to donate online, you might want to consider doing that. But I think during this period of health emergency, we should all stay as clear away from that collection basket as possible, starting with the priests, because it's a clear and present danger to public health. So I would definitely avoid getting anywhere near the collection plate, basket, or bag, so long as the state of things is so terrible that you can't have communion on the hand.
And on this question, it says extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist are not to receive from the chalice. Why just extraordinary ministers? I think we should do away with the wine, because we receive both species in the Eucharist, right?
We sure do.
We can cut down. I think we should cut down on the Eucharistic ministers, so it should only be priests. Actually, I think we should abolish this Eucharistic ministers, because I think the Eucharistic ministers, it's hard to. It's more things you have to guard against. You don't know. The Eucharistic minister might be sick, but just isn't aware that he has coronavirus.
Yeah, I think only the priest should be giving out communion during this terrible period of emergency.
Definitely. And
in fact, I'll make you a deal. Where they get rid of the collection and the Eucharistic ministers, I'll consider receiving in the hand.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a statement.
Well, it'll show they're sincere,
and it shows your confidence.
Yes,
because you wouldn't do it, but you know they're not going to do it.
Oh no! Public health above all. I know they're sincere.
And I'd love to know their reasoning for forcing communion on the hand. You know, like the actual science behind it in terms of transmission. I'm sure it's very well thought out. And I'd love to understand them, because I'm sure they really thought this out. You know.
Well, I can understand one of the problems, and that is, you get the priest's finger close to the mouth, and sometimes, as you know, the priest likes to touch your tongue in order to make you annoyed. But there's a way around that too. If instead of standing for communion, everyone kneels, they're able to bend their head back and put out their tongue in such a way that the priest is easily able to put the host on the tongue without any danger of getting his finger wet.
Yeah.
It's the difference because when you're standing, you can't go like this,
Right.
which you can when you're kneeling. So you see, if the people are kneeling for communion, they can bend their head back, put out their tongue, and the priest is easily able to drop the host on the tongue without any danger of getting his finger wet. When they're standing, they're right. That is much more problematic.
Well.
So maybe what they should also get away from standing for communion, just during the emergency, of course.
Just during the murder. Yeah. I mean, let's try it out, as an experiment.
Now, have everyone kneel and receive on the tongue, but tilt their heads back and put their tongues forward.
Better safe than sorry. That's what I always say.
That's what I say.
Yeah.
No Eucharistic ministers, no collection.
Yeah. Okay. Time for the book of the week. This is another one of the kind of the best sellers in our store. The Mass and Its Folklore by John Hobson Matthews. This was inspired by you, because I actually hadn't heard of this book, and you said, Vinny, you've got to publish this. So I read it, and it ended up being an amazing book. Would you like to tell us why this book is so amazing, Charles?
Well, I will. The author, I first encountered the book by reading one of the forewords, one of the best of the several different forewords, different editions of Father Lasance's Missal. It's a very good foreword, but it had lengthy quotes, big chunks of that book, The Mass and Its Folklore. And it goes into how our ancestors really felt about the Mass, how they treated it, how important it was, for instance, to see the elevation and things like that, how they wouldn't do anything without first having gone to Mass. Well, I thought that was great. So, what years and years ago, I ordered a copy through interlibrary loan, and I read it, and I was just blown away by it. I recommended it to you and wrote the foreword, as you recall, but then I had to do a little research into the man who wrote it. What an interesting guy. A convert. He was born on the island of Malta. His parents from the British military. He learned to speak Maltese as well as English, and then he moved to Cornwall and learned the extinct Cornish language. Cornwall is a Celtic country like Brittany or Wales or the Isle of Man.
Yeah, I know it well because Poldark, the recent show, is in Cornwall.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, at the same time, there was another Catholic convert, roughly the same era, who was also big in the Cornish linguistic revival, named Henry Jenner. But George Hobson Matthews then moved to Wales and became a big man in the Welsh revival, although Welsh had not become extinct the way Cornish had. But he also was one of the founders of the St. David's Society that worked for the conversion of Wales back to the Catholic faith. And he's just a very interesting man. And the Mass and Its Folklore was typical of the kind of books he wrote.
Okay, so what about the book? What makes the book amazing?
Well, the book reminds you of the fact that the Mass is more than just this ceremony we go to on Sundays, and that it's an integral part of our lives, or should be. Our ancestors lived by it. They swore by the Mass. They, as I say, they wouldn't do anything without starting out. They go to Mass before they were going to go on a journey. They'd go to Mass before they were going to do any kind of a business transaction. They go to Mass before, you name it. King Arthur's knights are always going to Mass every time you turn around. because Mass was that important to them.
Yeah.
And the implication is that it should be that important to us today. A living link with our ancestors, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. My impression of it was that, that this book expresses such a profound and deep love for the Mass that it could not come out of this generation, the modern generation, because perhaps because the Mass is so prevalent and it's easy to take for granted. We can go daily. And, I think there's some discussion of the penal times when you had to risk your life sometimes to go
go
to
to Mass.
Mass.
And I think, if I remember correctly, it does talk about the Mass rocks and things like this.
Yeah.
And, there were rocks in Ireland and England and Scotland where fugitive priests would say Mass, and they'd have a lookout in case some of the soldiers were coming.
Right.
These are the people who we descend from to some degree. If, figuratively speaking, if you're an English-speaking Catholic, and very often, quite literally, if your family kept the faith during the penal times. But the combination, because it has two parts. It's got the Mass in the Middle Ages and the Mass in the penal times. And as you say, it's got a love and understanding for the Mass that could only come from really exploring its relationship to folklore, to how people really lived. You get a certain insight on the Mass if you read the writings of saints and mystics. You get a certain insight from theologians. You get a certain insight from liturgists. But this is how the people who lived it dealt with it.
That's so well put, because it's so true. And to give it as an example of what you say, like one of the folklores that emerged is that Mass elongates your life for the extent that you've been to Mass. Like if you go to Mass for an hour, you will now live 1 hour longer. You have not, that gets added to your time on the earth. So it's a wonderful thought to think like that. And that's how the people back in the day, they viewed Mass in that beautiful way.
Let's hope we can too.
Yeah, let's hope we can too. Okay, that will do it for this episode. Any closing thoughts, fellas?
Well, yeah. Being in Slovakia, I was reminded of, I went to several churches and all that. And one of them was Neo-Gothic. One was actual Gothic. One was Baroque. And it hit me just how the Mass attracted beauty to it in different times and places. That was, how do I put it? It attracted beauty to it from artists and architects and so forth. That was very specific to a given time and place, but always sort of equivalent, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Baroque is very different from Neo-Gothic, but with both, the center was the Mass.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
And their differences, I mean, they're beautiful, but in very different ways, which is a wonderful sort of concrete parable of the universality of the Catholic Church. And I've got to be honest with you too. It reminded me, when you look at these beautiful things built for the traditional Mass, you ask yourself, why did they change it? It all worked. The church had problems, but the way things were done didn't address them. All they did was break things, destroy. They didn't create. And that, you see, ladies and gentlemen, thinking back to the Mass and its folklore, that's our problem. We've lost touch with the very things that made us creative. The Mass inspired literally centuries of artists and musicians and sculptors and builders, architects, all sorts of people. We have nothing like that in the world today that can inspire anything like that kind of beauty.
It's a beautiful thought. Okay, that'll do it for this episode. All you people who aren't subscribed, remember to subscribe. All you people who aren't patrons, remember to become patrons. All you people who haven't liked the show, like the show. And that'll do it for this episode. So remember, if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
And the soul you save
may be your own.
See you next time, everyone.
Bye-bye all.